Welcome to the Newsong podcast. I'm so glad that you joined us today. In just a moment, you're going to hear an encouraging message from Stephen about Jesus and how much he loves you. If we can serve you in any way, don't hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok by searching Newsong CS. If you've been impacted by this message, join those who so generously give so we can reach more people with the story of Jesus. Visit newsongcs.com/give or text the word EASY to 94000. Now sit
Just
back and enjoy this message.
Thank you that we were able to be here. I think, Pat, you did such a good job at greeting us this morning. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I am just so thankful for the men and women who laid their life down so that we could be free and enjoy weekends like this. So if we could just take a second to just thank them and remember them for their bravery, their sacrifice, their courage. So again, we just say thank you. And I know that just doesn't do justice to what they deserve, but I just wanted to acknowledge them this morning. So you guys may notice that Pastor Stephen and Cynthia are not here. They are in California. It's a big week for Foursquare in general. Pastors are in Anaheim. That is our yearly national connection, our convention. This year is pretty big, as Pastor Ron last week was talking. It is our 100-year celebration. So Foursquare as a movement has been around for 100 years. So it's going to be a big time out there. While Christian and I, we are going to follow pastors out there tomorrow morning to just be with them and all the other pastors around the country and of the world. If I could just ask one small request for you guys over the next 3 or 4 days, just lift Pastor Stephen and Cynthia up in prayer. We should be praying for our pastors every day anyways. This is not an easy job. But I would say more so this upcoming week than before. Just pray that they are refreshed, that they are rejuvenated, that they are filled back up. Of course, this is a time to just connect with one another at convention, but it's also a time for pastors to be able to plug back in and get refreshed, because that doesn't happen nearly enough for them. They are constantly pouring themselves out. So if we could just pray that they are able to plug in and just, because when they get back, I'm so excited for where the Lord is leading Pastor Stephen and where he is going to bring us into in this next season. However, this morning, if you have your Bibles, I want to guide you to 2 Samuel chapter 9. And I feel like 2 Samuel chapter 9 portrays the gospel message in a way that I would say better than anywhere else in the Old Testament. This account takes place 10 years after David has become king. To summarize what's going on, life is good. He has subdued the Philistines. He subdued the Moabites and the Arameans. He is gaining land and cities. The Bible, a couple of chapters before this, talks about how he is administering justice and righteousness over his people. So everything's going smooth, right? It's a good time to be alive. And that's where we pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 9. Starting in verse 1, it says, Then David said, Is there yet anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. And they called to him David, and the king said to him, Are you Ziba? And he said, I am your servant. The king said, Is there not yet anyone of the house of Saul to whom I may show the kindness of God? And Ziba said to the king, There is still a son of Jonathan who is crippled in both feet. And so the king said to him, Where is he? And Ziba said to the king, Behold, he is in the house of Micah, the son of Amiel, in Lodabar. Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Micah, the son of Amiel, from Lodabar. And before we go any further, I just need to set the stage for you guys. I need to properly set it up so we can understand the magnitude of this encounter that's about to take place. Because you see, Jonathan was Saul's son, and David and him were very close friends. There's multiple accounts throughout their lives of how close they were to one another. We see in 1 Samuel 20, verse 42, that the two of them had made a covenant together to care for the descendants of the other. So they get up, hey, we're going to have kids. Let's make a covenant. Let's make a promise to one another that we will care for the other's children if anything would to happen to us. So after all of this time, so King David, mind you, he's been king for 10 years. That covenant had took place, I don't know how long before that. So all this time has passed. So for whatever reason, David feels led to follow through with the promise that he made all those decades ago. Is there anyone left in the house of Saul whom I may show the kindness of God? And just a quick point here. The kindness of God is powerful, you guys. The kindness of God it overshadows everything else. Because don't forget, Saul hated David. Saul, on more than one occasion, was trying to kill him. He spent years trying to take David out. He hated David so much. At one point, the Bible says that he tried to throw a spear at his son, Jonathan, just for helping David out. So I don't think anyone would blame David if he didn't show kindness to anyone in the line of Saul again. Right? I feel like that's a fair point. That David spent years of his life in the wilderness, moving from cave to cave because he was running from Saul. We also read that at one point David was behind this curtain playing the harp for Saul, and Saul goes into this this jealous rage. And he picked up a spear and threw it at David, trying to pin him to the wall, really. So I don't think anyone in that time would look at David and be like, hey, it's kind of messed up that you're not showing kindness to his descendants. But the kindness of God doesn't just belong to God. He gives it to you and me so that we can give it to other people. And it turns out that the only son of Jonathan and the grandson of Saul that's alive still is a guy by the name of Mephibosheth. And I'm just going to apologize now. I'm going to be saying that name a lot. So if I mess it up, it is what it is. But can you imagine what is going through Mephibosheth's head at this time? He's living in this place, Lodabar, and all of a sudden a servant of the king comes and says, hey, you're coming with me. The king wants to see you. I can't imagine what is running through his head because he understood what was taking place here. To begin with, his life was likely over. You see, because in the ancient world, when you took the throne, one of the first things you did was consolidate power. And you would wipe out any threat to your throne. Well, who were the threats to your throne? The lineage of the previous king before you, right? So any blood that might have a claim to the throne that would try to overthrow you at some point, you took care of them. You wiped them all. Anyone and everyone, you took them out. That's just how it was. There's a wide precedent in the Mesopotamian texts for the elimination of all rival claims to the throne when a king comes to power. We even see it in the Bible in 1 Kings 15:29. We read about a guy named Baasha. He wipes out the entire family of Jeroboam. Every single one of them. So from a cultural standpoint, that's just what you did. So you see Mephibosheth, he is living in Lodabar. He's in hiding because he knows if he's ever found what's more likely what's going to happen to him. So he's thinking on his way there, man, I've finally been found. This is it. Not only is he dealing with that, but Mephibosheth is also dealing with great poverty. How do we know this? He's living in another man's house. Can you imagine growing up in the courts of King Saul and going from all that entails to living in Lodabar? He was in line to be king one day, and now he is living under the roof of another man's house. Not only that, but also the location of where he is living is a great indication to his quality of life as well. You see, Lodabar, Dabar, it means pasture or food. Well, lo means no. So Mephibosheth is literally living in a place that stands for no pasture or food. It was a barren land. It was in the outskirts. It was far away from Jerusalem in this tiny corner, and there was nothing there. And then on top of all of this, he's lame in both feet. We read in 2 Samuel 4, verse 4, that when the news of Saul and Jonathan, because you see Saul and Jonathan, they were both killed in the same battle on the same day. So when news of that got to Saul's household, we read that Mephibosheth's nurse picked him up and fled their house. She did this, and as she was fleeing, because everyone knew what happened to the line of the king, she drops him. In her haste, she drops him. And it says because of that fall, he became lame in both feet. Talk about a bleak situation. He's in hiding, he's poor, and he can't walk. And he's about to experience the generosity of a king that is driven by the kindness of God. So picking back up in verse 6, it says, Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and prostrated himself. And David said, Mephibosheth? And he said, here is your servant. David said to him, do not fear, for I will surely show kindness to you for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of your grandfather Saul, and you shall eat at my table regularly. Again, he prostrated himself and said, what is your servant that you should regard a dead dog like me? Then the king called Saul's servant Ziba and said to him, all that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. You and your sons and your servants shall cultivate the land for him, and you shall bring in the produce so that your master's grandson may have food. Nevertheless, Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall eat at my table regularly. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, according to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so your servant shall do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table as one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all who lived in the house of Ziba were servants to Mephibosheth. What an amazing scene, right? Mephibosheth is literally on the ground, prostrating himself before King David, calling himself a dead dog. And David says, no. Don't be afraid. I want to show kindness to you. Everything your grandfather owned, it's now yours again. And not only that, but I'm going to give you his old servant Ziba, and him and his sons and servants are going to take care of the land for you. And by the way, he has 15 sons and 20 servants. So you have the land, but you're never going to have to touch it. They're going to take care of everything for you. In one moment, he went from Lodabar to land holdings and everything else to go with it, right? And oh yeah, by the way, there's also a place at my table alongside my family for you too. You guys, that's the kindness of God on full display. And is that not a picture of our Savior in us? God doesn't invite us to the banqueting table of grace and salvation and wholeness based on what you did. Sorry to break it to you. No, you see, God saw Jesus struggling to breathe on that cross. And because of what he did then, he is showing us kindness for his sake now. How many of us have been in that place where we've been on our hands and feet before Jesus knowing that we're not worthy of him? We're seeing ourselves as a dead dog. Who am I? And Jesus says, you know what? I mean, you're right. But I died on that cross and I rose again so that you could be a new creation. Come, sit at my table and experience the freedom and the forgiveness and the salvation and the grace and the mercy and the transformation that takes place at that table. And I don't know about you, but I personally will never get over the power that comes from sitting at a table that we don't deserve because Jesus hung on a cross that we do deserve. And adding to this, we see that word kindness 3 different times in this text. This encounter is only 13 verses long. We see that word kindness 3 times. And the Hebrew word for kindness here is chesed. I'm going to say a couple Hebrew words. I'm going to butcher them. So we have this chesed. This is one of the most important and powerful words in the entire Bible. If someone had asked me to summarize the Bible in just one word, I think I would go with chesed. You see, it's the story of God's relationship with his people from the beginning all the way to you and me now. And chesed is it's hard to translate because it combines the ideas of unfailing love, generosity, mercy, and an enduring commitment and wraps them all up into one. Chesed describes the act of promise-keeping loyalty that is motivated by a deep personal care. In the Bible, God is loyal and loving for no other reason than that's just simply who he is. And God's chesed is enduring, and it is abounding. And that word abounding, I love it because God is saying, all of these characteristics of mine, I have all of those things. And I'm abounding in them. I don't have just a little bit of each. I have a lot of it all. And I don't know who needs to hear that this morning, but that chesed is for you even when our love and our generosity and our commitment to him are lacking, because God's character is not determined by our actions. When we are not committed to him, he's still committed to us. When we are not loving to him, his love never fails and it never fades away from us. When we are not loyal to him, his loyalty and his deep personal care for us never wavers. Just as the psalmist declares in Psalms 136, 26 different times, God's chesed endures forever. And that is what is driving King David in this encounter with Mephibosheth. He has experienced the chesed of God, and he can't help himself but show that same kindness to Mephibosheth. And this part of the story ends by saying in verse 13, so Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate at the king's table regularly. Now he was lame in both feet. Did y'all catch that? When we are first introduced to Mephibosheth, back in verse 3, we are told that he is lame in both feet. And then we have this amazing encounter of grace between him and King David. He is living in Jerusalem now as an adopted son to King David. All of the land of his family has been given back to him. He has the servants to work it for him. So why feel the need to repeat that he was lame in both feet? And you guys, this is why I love the Bible so much. God is so intentional when he speaks to us. Because you see in 2 Samuel 9, there are 2 different Hebrew words for lameness that are used here. The first word for lameness that we read in verse 3 is the word nakha, which means stricken or smitten. It is used to describe not just a physical lameness, but also lameness in the soul. It's the word that best describes a broken spirit. And when we first see Mephibosheth, he is living in Lodabar. He's a broken man. And it's not just his feet that are broken. It's his spirit as well. And while researching and studying for this morning, I came across this author that said the best way to describe the brokenness of nakha is the words that you find in suicide notes. The notes that are left after someone takes their life. And it was this person's job to inform the family or loved ones of the passing. So part of their job, she read a lot of these notes. And she said that these notes are filled with nacha. She said you can literally feel the person's brokenness in the words that they are writing on these pieces of paper. That's the state that we find Mephibosheth in verse 3. Well, the second word for lameness is used in verse 13. And that is pasich. And in the Bible, it is used to only refer to physical lameness. And if there's one thing that I want you guys to take away from this morning, this is it. That Mephibosheth is a broken man in spirit and body while living in Lodabar. But at the end of 2 Samuel 9, and after experiencing the grace of a king, he's only broken in body. His weakness did not vanish. I want you to hear that. His weakness did not vanish because of the grace of the king. His life was far, far, far better, but he was still lame. I would describe him as content. I think that is what the Apostle Paul is speaking to in Philippians 4:12 when he says, I have learned to become content in every situation. God's grace may not heal your body, but it will heal your soul. And God, in his grace, teaches us that as we sit at the king's table, we learn contentment because of Jesus. And please hear me on this. I 100% that God wants to and does heal us. If anything, my family is a testament to that over the last couple of years. I truly believe that he wants to heal us. He does it all the time, but not every time. Because you see, one day you and I will be sitting at that banqueting table with Jesus in heaven. Physical healing is not a requirement to sit at that table, but spiritual healing is. And so to close, I just want to make two observations. I'm keeping it short and sweet this morning, you guys. The first observation is that we are all Mephibosheth. Just like Mephibosheth, we separated ourselves from the king because we didn't know him or his love for us. Mephibosheth was only 5 years old when Saul and Jonathan were killed in battle. So he didn't know the type of relationship and the closeness that King David and his father had. He didn't know about those promises and that covenant that they made. And I can't help but think if he had gone to King David 10 years before, everything he received here in 2 Samuel 9, he would have gotten then. Just like Mephibosheth, our king sought us out before we sought him out. The king's kindness is extended to us for the sake of another. For Mephibosheth, that kindness was for the sake of Jonathan. And for us, it is for the sake of Jesus. Like Mephibosheth, the king's kindness is based off of a covenant. And we must receive the king's kindness and humility. You see, with Mephibosheth, when he was on the ground before David and he heard all of these things that David was going to give him, the land, the servants, the seat at the king's table, he didn't say, that's right. I'm the grandson of a king. This is mine. I deserve all of this. I never should have lost this in the first place. We don't see that. He prostrated himself before the king and called himself a dead dog. I'm not saying that we all need to do that. Please don't do that. But salvation should bring a level of humility to us because we are receiving far more than we deserve, and it is all because of Jesus. Like Mephibosheth, the king returns to us more than what we lost in hiding from him. We gain more in Jesus than we ever lost in Adam. And that's the beautiful thing about redemption. We are received as sons and daughters at the king's table with access and fellowship with the king. You know, when Jesus died on the cross and it says the veil tore from top to bottom, that's us getting access to God. And finally, our lameness is not immediately taken away, but it gives us a favor and an understanding that overcomes the sting of our weakness and changes the way that we think of ourselves. It shifts our perspective. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more next week, so you'll have to come back for part 2. So not only are we like Mephibosheth, but that second observation is we are also David. We should be seeking out our enemies and blessing them. We should look to bless the poor, the weak, the lame, and the hidden. We should bless others when they don't deserve it and bless them more than they deserve. We must show the kindness of God to others. So in short, we should do all of these things to other people because that's exactly what Jesus did to us. Jesus is chesed. So let me just close in prayer, you guys. Lord, I thank you for you. Lord, I thank you for your loving kindness, God. Lord, that even when we are being human and being ourselves, Lord, and we mess up and we fall short, that your chesed never fails. That it doesn't move away or back off from us because we stumble and fall. Lord, I just thank you, Lord, that you are constantly right there with a hand outstretched to pick us back up, God. And Lord, I just thank you for examples in your word of stories like this that we can live and shape and mold our lives around, God. So Lord, I just pray, Lord, that we can be a people, Lord, that we can be a church that is intentional about showing the kindness of you to everyone that we meet.
If you've been impacted by this message, join those who so generously give so we can reach more people with the story of Jesus. Visit newsongcs.com/give or text the word EASY to 94000.